I'm really excited to introduce our next speaker, who's joining us all the way from the UK. As Jakob mentioned, there's three things that we all need to keep in mind: flexibility and adaptability, preparedness, and he spoke about the importance of keeping connected and collaboration. And the next session is titled Attractions in the Tourism Economy, Why We Need to Work Together. And it's brought to us by our session sponsor, Formula D. And I think the topic of collaboration keeps coming up consistently throughout this pandemic period. So I think this is an incredible conversation. And it's brought to you by our speaker, Bernard Donoghue. Hi, Bernard. Welcome.
Hello,
Morning.
Bernard.
He is the director of the Association of Leading Visitor Attractions. The acronym is ALVA. And ALVA's members are comprised of the most iconic tourism attractions in the UK. He's an active lobbyist and represents the body of attractions and ensures that the members of the sector are well represented. He's been part of ALVA since 2011, and his career has traversed advocacy, communications, lobbying, tourism, the heritage industry. And in 2017, he was appointed by the Mayor of London as the Ambassador for Cultural Tourism. And when I read that, I was like, okay, I would love to have that role. Sounds incredible. He's also a member of the Mayor's Cultural Leadership Team and Board. So welcome, Bernard, and over to you.
Hi, good morning from London. It's starting out to be a very nice day here, but I'd much rather be in Cape Town, to be honest. So my presentation this morning is going to pick up on some of the things that Jakob has been talking about, but I'm not really going to be talking about coronavirus or COVID. I'm going to be talking about how working together means that you have a stronger voice with really good data and evidence, which really comes into its own at times of crisis like this. So let me just take you through a couple of things. I'm just trying to, here we are. So as you've just described, I'm the principal advisor to the Mayor of London for cultural tourism. I chair London's Theatre Festival. I chair the Council of WWF here in the UK. I'm a judge of the Museum and Heritage Awards here in the UK, and I'm a trustee of the People's History Museum in Manchester, and a member of the council. It's like a trustee board of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. But more importantly than that, I'm a fan of South Africa. I've been to South Africa probably about 20 times since 1995, and this is January last year. Me paragliding off the Lion's Head in Cape Town, an amazing, amazing experience. And I'm looking forward to going back to Cape Town and to Pretoria and to Johannesburg and to PE very, very soon. I really miss it. So our members in the UK are all the biggest ones that you've probably heard of. These are our museum and gallery members, everything from the V&A to our V&A, not your V&A, to the British Museum, the Natural History Museum, Museum of London, Oxford, Cambridge, Scotland, Glasgow. So all of the big ones that get more than 1 million visitors per year are members of ours. These are our heritage members, so including Buckingham Palace, the Houses of Parliament, cathedrals, but also places like the Tower of London, Kensington Palace, the National Trust properties, and some of the biggest stately homes as well. These are our gardens and leisure members. So everything from the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Royal Opera House, the National Theatre, but also places like Warner Brothers Studio Tour, which opens today here in the UK after being closed for 5 months. That's where Harry Potter was filmed. Easily one of the best, most amazing visitor attractions in the world, because you're standing on the spot where Hermione was clever, where Harry was brave, where Ron was pathetic. So it's an amazing, amazing immersive experience. So good luck to them today, because they're opening for the first time in 5 months today. I just want to take you through to some of the data that we've got. Tourism in the UK is our 5th biggest industry. It's the 3rd largest employer. It's worth, in a normal year, £127 billion to the UK economy. It creates 1 in 3 of all new jobs, and it'd be really interesting to see post-COVID the resilience and the flexibility of the tourism industry in creating new jobs when actually we're going to be undertaking an enormous amount of redundancies in tourism and hospitality. Up until the beginning of this year, we were creating in tourism 1 new job every 8 minutes since the 2008 recession at all skill levels, from no qualifications through to the highest qualifications. But what we haven't had in the UK is political consistency. So in the last 10 years, we've had 13 different national government ministers with responsibility for tourism. Now, for me, my job is to make sure that all of those ministers, when they come into role, absolutely understand not only the economic importance of tourism and attractions, but also its social and cultural importance too. And that's why working together with the rest of the tourism economy, and in particular, attractions working together, sharing their insights and sharing their data, is absolutely vital. And I'll go on to explain a little of that in some of the case studies that I've got this morning. So one of the things that we've been able to do very successfully here in the UK is that all of our members share all of their visitor numbers, at the moment weekly, normally it's monthly, and we publish that for all of them on an annual basis. So if you go to the ALVA website, ALVA website here in the UK, you'll see a list of all of our members and their visitor numbers for the last 20 years or so. And they share all of that very, very openly. And I'll come on right at the end to share also what they share with us. And I think it might surprise you. But as they've been able to share all of their visitor numbers, we publish a list every year, and it looks like a sort of a record chart list. Who's number 1, who's number 2, who's gone up, who's gone down, who's in at number 5, all of those kind of things. And the media love it, of course, because it's a list, but it also shows how popular and successful UK visitor attractions are and how loved they are by the public. And that's particularly important when it comes to times like this, when I'm talking to government ministers on a daily basis, to really give them a good sense of how important visitor attractions are, not only to their local economy, but also to the physical and mental health of UK citizens. But one of the things that we do with that data is that we're able to go back over the last 9 or 10 years and work out which visitor attractions did well, grew their audiences, and in particular grew more diverse audiences. So they're not just getting the same people. And are the successful visitor attractions doing things that are relatively similar? Are there common DNA to visitor attraction success? And I'd say there are, here in the UK at least. And there are 4 things. One is refresh and entice your product. Secondly, talk about your authentic sense of place. Tell people's stories, and staff, not stuff. And I'll go on to explain each of those now. On refresh and entice, what we found was that when attractions were refreshed and refurbished, had new or temporary exhibitions, and do well regardless of the weather. And of course, the weather here in the UK is a really significant issue. It's probably the biggest driver or stop to people going out to visitor attractions. So if you've refurbished and refreshed, if you've got a new reason for people to come, you do well regardless of the weather. And one of the other things that we found is that particularly at moments of economic instability or recession or crisis, people prioritize going to their local visitor attractions rather than national ones. And in particular, again, at times like this, but at times of recession as well, they really value value for money. So things like family tickets and family pricing and year passes do really well. The second thing is an authentic sense of place. When you go around the world, there are very similar shops in every cities. And if you go into high streets in towns and cities across the UK, very similar shops, and actually you could transport one high street from one town to another and it would look almost identical. High streets and towns are becoming more homogenized, and therefore the authenticity of difference and place becomes more and more important. And so attractions must really reek of their locality, including through the procurement of food and drinks and retail products. For example, the garden route is so different from the wine route. Franschhoek is so different from Stellenbosch, which is so different from PE, which is so different from Johannesburg, which is so different from Pretoria. So let that difference, the reeking of local, really come through in your storytelling, that you can only buy retail products, so you can only buy food and drink from where you are. The other thing that we know is people love to stand on the spot where history happens. And in particular, at times of recession or political instability, times like now really, people want to be reassured of who they are and where they come from. Because the future is so uncertain and unpredictable, and COVID-19 has really underlined that, because the future is so unpredictable and scary and unknowable and alarming, the past, in contrast, feels definite and factual and sure, and often reassuring and nostalgic. But of course, that nostalgia can be toxic and false nostalgia, as well as good nostalgia. But what it means is that people really value going back to places that are older than them and that reek of history. And I want to give you a quick example. This is Shakespeare's birthplace house. This is the house in Stratford-on-Avon in the Midlands in the UK, where Shakespeare was born. His father made gloves in the house and sold them through the window out onto the high street. And those flagstones you see in the top left-hand corner of the picture, those tiles on the floor, they're original. So those are the tiles that Shakespeare stood on and walked on and crawled on when he was a baby. Those are the tiles on which Shakespeare sat when he learnt to read and write for the first time. And every day, visitors from around the world, and in particular from China and India, take off their shoes and socks to stand on those flagstones, to stand on those tiles, to have a physical, almost umbilical connection with the past and with someone truly great. At times of uncertainty, we want to have a connection with really significant people and places and history to give us a sense of where we're coming from, because we're not completely sure of where we're going to. Staff, not stuff. Curators probably don't like this phrase, and it's a kind of crude summary. But what I mean by this is that people initially come to you, whether you're the Rugby Museum in Cape Town or whether you're Robben Island, people initially come to you because of what you've got, your collection, your things. But they come back because of how they were treated by your staff. So the best memories of attractions from people are people, not objects. So people first visit because of what you've got, but they return because of who you employ. So allow your staff to bring stories alive, to explain, to excite, to dramatize, and to surprise. I've been to Robben Island 3 times now, I think, and the last time I went was in January of last year, in 2019. And again, an amazing, extraordinary place, a fantastic visitor experience. But what, of course, brings it alive is hearing the personal testimony from political prisoners. So an amazing experience, but actually heightened and made deep and resonant and compelling by hearing the first-hand accounts from people for whom it was a direct personal experience. And it's not just me saying that, because we know in visitor attractions that that's a really compelling thing, but it's other people too. So about 3 years ago, we had the chief executive of Airbnb UK come and talk to one of our council meetings. Our council meeting is a similar conference to this. And he told us that when Airbnb were putting together their business plan, they looked at TripAdvisor reviews. Visitor attractions have the most reviews on TripAdvisor, not hotels or restaurants, visitor attractions. So one of the things that he said was that when they did the research, the biggest difference between a 4-star TripAdvisor review, very good, and a 5-star review, excellent, is that a 5-star review was 4 times more likely to mention a staff member's name. I went to the Table Mountain cable car. It was an incredible experience, but actually one of the things that I particularly loved was when I bought my ticket from Rachel. She told me that the best time to come up was for sundowners. You know, is that kind of tribute. So the difference between a very good visitor experience at your attraction and an excellent one is you and your colleagues. Now, your HR, your personnel colleagues will absolutely love this. And of course, it makes complete sense, but it's really worth underlining the fact that this isn't just us saying good stuff. This has got really good evidence behind it too. The other thing that we found is that where visitor attractions have been able to grow their visitor numbers, but also diversify their visitor numbers, so it's not just the same things, these are some of the behaviors that they're exhibiting. They're becoming increasingly provocative, increasingly disruptive. They take risks, they stretch their brand, and they develop new audiences. And all of this is going to be more and more important in a COVID environment, in a COVID world, where there's more pressure on visitor attractions to get more income in, but also for them to look and feel like they're reflective of and representative of the places where they're situated. So I want to give you, again, some examples. This is a Vincent van Gogh painting. And the reason that I'm using this is that here in London, I'm at my home in London, in Stockwell, in central London. 3 doors down away from me is where Vincent van Gogh lived for 1 year when he was here in 1878. And there's a blue plaque outside his house, and it shows you where he lived here in London. So Van Gogh is a very famous previous neighbor of mine. So I wanted to give you this as an example. This is his Yellow Room in Arles, a very famous painting, and it's one of, I think, about 16 that he did, all in different colors. And this is the Airbnb equivalent. So this was created by the Art Institute of Chicago. They built their own room where you could stay, so you could live in the painting of the Yellow Room in Arles by Van Gogh. And they did it to promote their art exhibition, where they brought together a number of these very similar paintings. Let me show you that again. So that's the original painting. That's the room that you can stay in. And this is how they listed it on Airbnb. So it was an amazing, amazing coup. As you can imagine, it went viral on social media. It was absolutely huge. They sold it for £7 UK sterling per night. It was created as part of their new exhibition, Van Gogh's Bedrooms. The room is part of a larger apartment in the River North neighborhood of Chicago. It's big enough to sleep two. It was absolutely sold out, as you can imagine. The opportunity to sleep in a Van Gogh painting was just too compelling for everybody. But this is the really clever thing. The whole of the creation of that room cost less than 250 UK pounds. They sold it for £7 a night. They made an absolute profit, huge, huge profit. But also their marketing and their social media went crazy, absolutely crazy. One of the reasons that I particularly love this example is that creativity and innovation doesn't have to come with a big price tag attached. You don't have to throw really big marketing rand at these kind of innovations. Actually, it's about being provocative and disruptive and taking risks and doing new things that will catch the eye rather than spending a huge amount of money on them. And here's another example. This is a group of people all sat on the floor. Nothing particularly unusual about that, except this is on the floor of York Minster. York Minster is one of the greatest Romanesque pre-Gothic cathedrals in Northern Europe. And this is what they did. There's a real craze at the moment here in the UK and across Europe more generally for the most extraordinary light projections. I mean, light projection technology has become now so sophisticated. So these are projections onto the ceiling of York Minster in York, in Yorkshire, in Northern England. I mean, absolutely extraordinarily beautiful. I went to see it last October, November, when it was last on. It's only been on twice. But let me give you some metrics. So that's the projection up onto the ceiling. I mean, absolutely stunning. And it completely changes in a beautiful visual narrative way. So it's like a constantly evolving light show. When they first introduced it in June 2019, it was for a fundraising dinner. And they had 700 people come and sit in the nave with this thing going on all around them. They raised £1.4 million sterling. But then they had 3,000 members of the public paying £5 per head for the next 2 nights. And they raised £12,000 sterling, excluding VAT. The light show was only 10 minutes long and played 3 times per night. So they got in 3 different waves. But here's the really interesting thing. The people who came to the 2 evening showings at £5 per head were mainly local visitors. Now, they could come in York Minster at any time for free. It's usually a paid for attraction. But if they're local residents, they can come in at any time for free. But they hadn't, because they didn't think that York Minster was for people like them. And so they heard about it on the local TV news and from dinner guests and then paid their £5. It was almost as if the visitor attraction was doing something unusual, which gave them permission to come in. So even though people know that museums or some museums and galleries are free and open to the public, actually, they still need explicit invitation to cross the threshold. Here's another example. Again, it's a cathedral, because I think actually cathedrals here in the UK have been really interesting and brave and provocative and disruptive in doing very different things. Peterborough Cathedral in the east of England teamed up with the Science Museum Group, which has 5 museums across the UK, notably the Science Museum in London. And our astronaut, Tim Peake, he was in the Soyuz capsule a number of years ago. They put the Soyuz capsule inside Peterborough Cathedral. Now, Peterborough Cathedral is a beautiful cathedral. It's really only famous because Henry VIII's first wife, Catherine of Aragon, she outlived Henry. She died there and is buried there. But you can run out of Catherine of Aragon fan visitors pretty quickly. So Tim Peake's Soyuz capsule at Peterborough Cathedral got in completely different visitors beyond the Catherine of Aragon community. And because the cathedral was doing something different and provocative and quirky and interesting, people felt invited and confident to cross the threshold, even though they knew that they could go into Peterborough Cathedral at any time. And it was a beautiful blend of science and faith and modernity and heritage. And over 1.3 million people in the UK saw Tim Peake's spacecraft during its 20-month tour of different places. And Peterborough Cathedral saw 171,361 visitors come to see the Soyuz capsule. And it was unique in being the only non-museum venue on the tour. But again, the number of people who came in because of that, and in particular, the number of local people who came in who'd never walked across the threshold before, was absolutely astonishing, provocative, disruptive, risk-taking. And here's something that hopefully will still be happening in the next couple of months, and that's Norwich Cathedral in Norfolk, and again in the east of England. You might recognise Dippy the Diplodocus. It used to be in the Great Hall of the Natural History Museum. It's been on tour for the last 2 years. It's been going around different museums and galleries and places across the UK, and its last place that it will tour is the nave of Norwich Cathedral. It's a 22-meter dinosaur. It's actually a cast. It's not the real thing. It's a Victorian cast. I think it was made in about 1905. But just imagine having a dinosaur skeleton in the nave of a cathedral. Now, this is going to be extraordinary when it happens, and I still hope it does, because the planning has been in years. So this is what it normally looks like within the Natural History Museum. And one of the great things about this is that they used to have sleepovers for kids. So kids would bring their sleeping bags, sleep underneath Dippy the dinosaur inside the Natural History Museum. An amazing experience. I mean, just think about it. That's a hard floor, by the way. I mean, this is a Victorian building, and that's a marble floor. But the opportunity to sleep under a dinosaur skeleton, and I think they're going to be doing it in the cathedral as well. But just have a look at this. So when the Natural History Museum had the dinosaur sleepovers, one, they call it Dino-Snores for kids. Brilliant, fantastic language. But two, look down at the bottom of the screen. The tickets were £60 UK sterling for one child to sleep on a very hard floor underneath a skeleton of a dinosaur that's not actually even the real skeleton. And you might think, wow, who pays that kind of money? And I asked the director of the Natural History Museum, who pays that kind of money? And is it largely wealthy people from inside London? And he said two things. One was actually 2/3 of the people buying those tickets for their children are not from London. They're from outside London. So they're making a day of it. They're making an overnight visit for themselves. But the second thing is that he said, what they're not paying for is to sleep on a floor overnight. What they're purchasing is a lifelong memory for their child. And that's a very different proposition. So when you think about purchasing or commoditizing or pricing memories and experiences, that allows you to think much more provocatively, creatively, and disruptively. And then something that happened last year, which was astonishing, is that Rochester Cathedral, which is in Kent, in southeast of England, they put a crazy golf course inside their cathedral as well. So you know these little crazy golf things where you just go around the course, and it's absolutely amazing. In the first 16 days, there were 13,000 visitors to Cathedral compared to 6,500 during the same period in the year before. Practically all of them local, practically all of them had never been inside the cathedral before. But because it was doing different, provocative, interesting things, they came. Norwich Cathedral, again, really interesting backstory. They put a helter-skelter from a fairground inside their cathedral. Again, really provocative, absolutely amazing. There's some fantastic photos, by the way, if you Google this, of seeing choristers and vicars and the bishop going down the helter-skelter. Absolutely amazing. They had thousands of people coming along to see this amazing, extraordinary thing, and to really see Norwich Cathedral in a completely different light. This is Lichfield Cathedral, where they had light projections, and it was to mark the 50th anniversary last year of the Apollo 11 mission on the moon. And so they had light projections of the moon onto the ceiling of the cathedral. They had, if you can see on the photograph, they had a massive photograph of the lunar landscape all across the surface of the floor of the cathedral, so you could feel that you were walking across the moon's surface. They also had the Apollo film screened inside the cathedral, and again, bringing completely new, completely different people inside who thought that they had permission to enter because the cathedral wasn't behaving like a cathedral. And the last couple of examples before I finish, St. Albans Cathedral, you probably think I'm a real cathedral fan, and I am kind of, but these are just such good examples because cathedrals tend to be conservative, small c, and not risk-taking, but when they do, something extraordinary happens. So St. Albans Cathedral used to have, until the Henry VIII Reformation in the 16th century, incredible pictures of the saints. And of course, during the Reformation, they were all whitewashed and taken down, and the place was a kind of barren white building. But what they found through science and technology is what the paintings would have looked like and how they projected them back onto the walls of these cathedrals. So this is what, on the left-hand side, this is what the St. Thomas of Becket would have, well, looks like now, and on the right, what it would have looked like. And again, extraordinary number of people coming through to see the cathedral not acting like a cathedral, it being provocative and disruptive and risk-taking. And the last couple of things are the visitor experience. Now, this photo actually isn't real, but those of us who live in the UK, I think we've all been to somewhere like this, where it's just a couple of lumps of rock in the middle of a field. Welcome people. Of all the places around the world, and the world is getting much, much smaller, it's much easier to get to places and more affordable to get to places. But of all the places in the world that they could go, they've chosen to spend their precious leisure time and their hard-earned money with you. How enormously flattering. Say thank you and welcome. That's not just polite, that's recognizing what they're doing for you. Staff, not stuff. The biggest difference between a very good visitor experience and an excellent one are you and your colleagues and your front of house staff. Do you offer personal learning experiences? So can someone go into your visitor attraction just for 20 minutes if it's free, rather than an hour or 2 hours and see everything? Have you got things that say, on this spot, this happened? If you've got restoration or gardening going on or conservation, watch it happen. Encourage your gardeners to talk about what they're doing this week, to give gardening tips to your visitors. And don't forget to say thank you and goodbye. And why is this important? Again, it's not just about politeness. It's because if people, and this is our research going back about 12 years, if people have a good experience at your visitor attraction, they're 54% very likely to recommend it to their friends. But if they've had a good welcome experience, welcome, have you been here before? Thank you so much for coming. Where do you come from? How much time have you got? If you've only got limited time, let me tell you about my 3 favorite things here, my personal recommendations. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope we see you soon. Come back in 3 weeks' time when we have a food festival here. The propensity to recommend goes up by 20% to 74% very likely to recommend. And of course, that has huge benefits for repeat business and selling memberships. And it all comes down to this. It's managing those 3 great challenges of value, getting money in, volume, getting people in, and visitor experience, making sure that they have a great time. And managing those 3 things so one is not at the expense of the other. And if you balance that carefully, that's where you achieve wise growth. I call this my visitor attraction trilemma as opposed to a dilemma. Managing those 3 things so it works well. And my very last slide before I finish is, we can only do and have all of those insights and the lobbying power of the attraction sector to government, which is crucial at times like this, because our members share everything. So here in the UK at ALVA, they not only share their visitor numbers, but also they share their average transaction value, their spend per head, their membership conversion, their membership retention, all of that we used to benchmark about 10 years ago, and it was anonymous. So you knew that you were 5th highest in terms of visitor experience, but you didn't know who the other 4 were. Now that's no longer anonymous. Everybody knows where they are and therefore can learn from all of their colleagues and peers. And in order to do that, we have 13 best practice groups of all of our member heads of HR, marketing, fundraising, security, finance, education, public engagement, where they all share best practice and insights so that together we're stronger as a sector for when we have to speak to government. We're better able to advocate for the power of the attraction sector, but we all learn from each other in order that the visitor gets the best possible experience wherever they go in the UK. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you this morning. It's been a real pleasure and an honor, and I'm really happy to answer any questions now, but also in the Meet the Speaker session a little later.
Yes.
Back to you.
Right. Thank you so much, Bernard.
It was amazing.
So many mic drop moments, and I think you've amassed a whole new legion of followers, one of them being me. Yes!
I've been following Bernard for a couple of years on Twitter, so I know that he was in Cape Town. Was it December, Bernard? You were drinking wine in Cape Town?
It was last January.
December 2019.
Yeah.
And Bernard was actually going to fly out and join us for this conference. You'd already said yes and committed your time, and then, of course, the flights were delayed. But perhaps I hope we can get to see you in Cape Town again. I know you're quite a fan of South Africa.
Yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
There were so many goosebump moments for me, Sabina and Bernard. The concept of nostalgia, because certainly from a V&A perspective, what we've learned is that people just want to experience the V&A in its most authentic way. Let go of the gimmicks, let go of the frills. Literally, people just want to go back. That's what they've missed, is an authentic experience. And I really loved the point you made around storytelling and creating human experiences through human beings. I think, literally.
And for me, what was amazing was the provocative use of spaces at attractions that are perhaps usually quite traditional. Very brave move. I know we've got some questions here around that.
In fact, we do have 2 questions that touch on it. So the first question is, are you aware of any backlash that frivolous events in sacred spaces like cathedrals, as an example? South Africans tend to be quite reserved and shy away from that type of thing.
Yes, I am. And actually, we've got really good data about how the cathedrals responded to that. So they did a risk assessment before they did all of these kind of mad, crazy things. And they had really good reasons why they were doing it. And they were able to tell people that people may have come along because of the helter-skelter or the crazy golf or whatever it was, but actually they came back on average 3 times more. Right. And that's when the cathedral was able to do its kind of outreach and faith and spirituality work. So there's really good evidence about the cathedrals managing that very small backlash, I have to say, but there was a backlash, managing that very carefully and explaining that they used that as a tool to get people to cross the door who wouldn't have done so otherwise.
Brilliant.
And someone's asked a question which resonates with me as well, is how do you enjoy the curators or perhaps those that are less able to or unwilling to engage in provocative thinking to join the marketing meetings? Because often the provocative thinking and fresh ideas comes from newbies, from younger people, from out there people, and there's always someone who's like, that's really the real start of it, isn't it? Is that first conversation in your boardroom.
Someone clearly read my mind, because as a marketing person, I experience this quite a bit. We're all quite brave and wanting to try new things, but you almost have to take the organization with you. So how do you do that?
Yeah, we've all been in those meetings where someone said, no, we tried that and it didn't work.
Been there.
Or, no, we can't do that, it wouldn't work. And actually, curators, in my experience, I mean, I'm a trustee of a museum. Curators want to show what they've got to the widest group of people, but they need to be persuaded that it's done in a non-frivolous, that was a good word, non-frivolous way, and actually underpinned by evidence and data. One of the really fascinating things, by the way, slightly off agenda, one of the really fascinating things about the Black Lives Matters phenomena is that increasingly museums and galleries are becoming safe places to talk about difficult subjects, whether it's about power or racism or homophobia or political injustice or poverty or whatever. So increasingly, museums and galleries are being stronger and more confident about being provocative and disruptive and talking about things that perhaps they didn't really talk about previously in a much more confident and assertive manner. But you're right, you have to bring the whole organization with you. You can't just be funky in the marketing department and be, safe in curatorial. You have to share all of that together.
And I think it's provocation with purpose versus being provocative just to get people's backs up.
Absolutely.
Bernard, it's not thank you and goodbye just yet,